But now I want to get into the specifics of what MIDI is. So it's not a sound per se, right? It was born in 1982, 1983, and it basically stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. It's a protocol developed in the 80s, which allows electronic instruments and other digital music tools to communicate with each other. So if we look at this little MIDI controller here, it looks really complicated, looks really fancy, but it's not. Those knobs are just communicating MIDI, right? MIDI. They're just communicating information to your DAW. We call it MIDI CC. So let me explain a little bit more. It's a series of messages that contain node information. What's that node information? Position, where I place it, pitch, high or low, velocity, more dynamic, less dynamic, and that has a lot to do with samples too. Meaning, if the sample was recorded very light, like a snare brush or something, then the velocity would be very light, like anywhere between 1 and 10 or 20. And then if they really hit it hard with an actual drumstick, then that'll go up to 80, 90, 100, 127. And then, of course, the length of that is also a big factor, right? MIDI messages are capable of transmitting a range of 0 to 127. So that's a total of 128 numbers, 0 being a number. So really, there's only 2 kinds of MIDI. This is stuff I wish I heard when I first started, right? Somebody just saying, hey, there's only 2 kinds. Like, oh, great. I don't have to learn. I don't have to read a whole book on it, you know? So the first is called a MIDI note event. So when you see somebody play a note, whether it's a keyboard or a launch pad, it's basically just on, off, right? If you think about the keyboard, C2 or not C2, right? C8, not C8. So bear in mind, this is all based on the position, the pitch, the velocity, and the length, because I can hold C2 for 4 seconds. I can also play C2 at a velocity of 2 or at a velocity of 127. You understand my point here. So that's the first kind of MIDI. The second type is called a MIDI CC, often called a continuous controller. Other schools of thought call it continuous change. I wish there was more consistency in the music world, but we are creative people and these things happen. So yeah, this is a MIDI message which controls parameters, volume, pan, sustain, pitch bend, aftertouch, expression. There are various controllers. Let's get into that right now before we move any further. So if we look at the volume controller inside of the channel strip in Logic, believe it or not, this is MIDI right here. Just a message. I can map this to a controller and control this externally. But let's look at the pan knob. This gives us a real good sense of what I'm talking about. If I click and drag all the way to the left, what number is that? Anybody?
64.
Right, negative, right? And then what number is this all the way to the right?
63.
All right. Show me your math skills, please. What's
127.
Right, but remember I said that it's a total of 128 numbers because 0 is a number. Yeah? So we missed that guy there, right? That's a number. So that's MIDI.
Yes.
In its essence. Got volume, pan, what else? Okay, let's go into obviously this is not going to apply to audio, right? So let's go to track number 5. This is a MIDI. I'm going to hit P, open up the piano roll. I'm going to hit A to open up automation. So I can have an automation screen in the tracks area, and that's all fine. The only problem is I'm not going to get the MIDI information that I'm seeking. The only way to get the specific MIDI CC information is to go into an actual piano roll track, virtual software instrument, and then open up the automation within this screen here. So then now, something that you should know is that you can automate on a track basis, meaning the entire track, or we can automate regions specifically. So why is this relevant? Well, you may not want to make a change for the whole track. So sometimes just using the region automation is great because you can just drop one part of it. Let me show you what I mean if I create 2 different regions. So now I've got this region and this one here on the left. And then I'm going to say, well, I only want to automate this region here on the right-hand side. So now I can control that separately than the other region. And region automation supersedes track automation. So
Eddie,
yeah, go ahead.
that what you just did with that diagonal thing, and then all of a sudden there were different numbers. What was that?
Oh, that was that was hold on to me. That was velocity. So let's say I was trying to create a crescendo with like a drum is probably the most obvious. I would click here, and bear in mind we're in region automation, so this is not possible in track automation. So I'm just trying to tell you there's a
Okay.
difference between these two. So I just click and I create a diagonal um, curve, and then I let go of the mouse, and then it creates that for me. Rather than having to adjust all of this manually like this, right, which is time consuming, you could
Oh,
just do that with one pass. Just boom.
that is
Okay.
awesome.
Yeah, you didn't know that? See, it's good stuff. I'm telling you.
Good stuff.
So let's look at track automation. This is standard stuff that you guys already know. Oh yeah, I need to go inside of the retro synth and control the filter. If I go under navigate, no, I'm sorry, mix, and I turn on auto select automation parameter in read mode, please enable this. Very important, because in the past we used to have to dig into this menu like the way I just did. Well, those days are over. All we have to do now is basically click. Let me reduce the size of this. Click on any one of these parameters. Like I'll click on, let's say, shape, oscillator shape by LFO. So now I can control this. The automation parameter is going to update accordingly. If I then want to change the semitones, that's going to update accordingly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty clean, pretty sweet. So that's all track automation. Volume, all things pan. If I wanted to automate a mute for whatever reason, you can do all that here. Remember the cycle through feature, which is really cool. Like if you've selected various features all at once, you can cycle through them. I haven't selected anything. Why don't I just manufacture this really quick? Hold on. And I can go in between all the various parameters that I've used up. So Command Y will switch between each parameter that I've used thus far, which is nice. I don't have to dig into that menu. So that's track automation at the most basic level. Okay, now we're going into today's subject, MIDI. So there's a lot more other stuff. You could see that there's a separate menu, right? We could still control as far as the regions go, like the normal stuff, volume, right? But now we have more options available to us. You can control the MIDI channel. You can control, like I said, note velocity, pitch bend, channel pressure, which is unique to some plugins, not all of them. In other words, how hard I press my MIDI controller, which is also dependent on which controller you have. Because if you have one that you bought for $25, it's just going to have a note on, note off feature. It's not going to have pressure and aftertouch and things of that nature. If I had a piano and I wanted sustain, and you don't play piano and maybe you program everything in, you can just create your own sustain here, which is really cool. I use this all the time. So this is region automation. So again, the first kind of automation, it's the note itself, the position, wherever I move it, right or left. I can change the length, and then of course we talked about velocity, 1 all the way to 127. It should be 0, but yeah, you get it. And then of course we've got MIDI CC, which is all of this stuff right here. If you wanted to record this in, you could too. Like if I just hit record and I have my keyboard controller and I play with the pitch wheel, you can achieve the same thing. It's just I don't have a controller in front of me. So let me know if you hear this. So it can come in the form of a piece of hardware. So all those fancy buttons, all that, the rotary knob, all these little push buttons, it's all MIDI. It's all note on, note off, or the rotary knob is 0 to 127, and then the pitch wheel, the modulation wheel is 0 to 127. I mean, it's all there. There is a new MIDI in town. It's called MPE. I forget what it stands for, but it's something like expressive modulation or something in that nature. But they're changing the way that MIDI is expressing itself. So before it was only, like I said, pitch, position, velocity. Now it's 5 different things. They're starting to play with glide. They're starting to play with slide. So if you look at a Roly, that has that technology. This technology here, the 2-shake controller, has the MIDI model, but you're able to play it in. Really cool. You should check that out at some point. And MIDI can be part of a software environment, just like Logic, Ableton, GarageBand. It's all inside. This is what we're using. This is what's allowing this whole thing to kind of communicate with itself. And then when we look at Drummer, that has a lot of MIDI features, smart controls, key command B, all those parameters that you're changing and affecting all have to do with MIDI. Patches. So the whole program is working with MIDI. So yeah, the advantages. Let's go over the advantages. Number one, it's easy to use, right? You can have a laptop. John was traveling 2 weeks ago and he was working on music. Fast, compact. You don't have to know how to play the guitar per se. It's great in that regard. Where it needs to improve, sometimes doesn't sound real. In the case of that synthesizer I just played, it was super flat, just one dimensional. We got to be careful that we don't get too robotic or too, I don't know. Sometimes it sounds like a toy, especially brass strings tend to sound really fake to me sometimes. So yeah, you really have to kind of make an effort to create a sense of realism. So let's go through our first exercise. The problem, MIDI needs to start with a note. So it needs like a starting point to actually play. So have you ever like been writing and you press play in the middle of a region and it doesn't play the actual sound until it gets to the next part, right? It's kind of annoying. Let me show you guys how to turn this off. So we want to go into MIDI chase. This is inside of File, Project Settings, MIDI chase. So if I play this from the middle of this section, you're not going to hear anything, right? That's because MIDI needs a starting point to play. But if I tell it in Project Settings right here, File, Project Settings, MIDI, and I go in the Chase tab and I turn it on right here, Notes, now it will play. Right? Doesn't matter where I start, it's going to play. Look, this is an ongoing conversation. So, you know, I don't think it ever really ends. I've been having this conversation for 6 years with myself. Now I get to have it with you guys, so I appreciate it.